Welcome to Swartz Shorts, the podcast all about the entrepreneurial ecosystem at Carnegie Mellon University and the larger Pittsburgh community.
Welcome back, everyone, to Swartz Shorts. Today we have an extra special guest who you might recognize from our previous episodes, our former host and now principal at Glen Pioneering, Pat O'Donnell. Pat earned a degree in industrial engineering from the University of Pittsburgh before joining Deloitte as a technology consultant. Pat co-founded Altian Education, an education consulting firm aimed at tackling student debt, before attending Carnegie Mellon University to earn his MBA. From CMU, Pat went on to join Headstorm as a project leader and then director of the Pittsburgh office. Now, Pat has struck out on his own with Glen Pioneering, which applies an intentional discovery process to identify and solve one or more problems with a new business. Pat, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Tyler. Good to be on this side of the table, and thanks, Brian.
Glad to have you here, Pat.
All right, so Pat, glad to have you back. I was super excited when you agreed to come back on the show because I know that you're getting into some exciting new stuff, and I don't think I fully understand it. So I'm excited to hear kind of straight from you about what you're working on and how things are going. Yeah. The fun thing about starting a new venture is that in the first few months, I don't know that I fully understand it either, right? And that's half the fun is figuring out exactly what this new venture looks like. But let me take a stab at explaining Glen Pioneering and what we do. So Glen Pioneering is really two work threads, and those two work threads intertwine a bit. So the first is consulting, but it's consulting that's non-traditional, and that it's consulting specifically for commercialization. Essentially, we help people with promising technologies to commercialize that technology and create value by finding a problem to solve for customers. And so I think in Pittsburgh, we have all this incredible technical talent. We have Carnegie Mellon, we have the University of Pittsburgh. The list goes on from there on brilliant technologists here in Pittsburgh. And so there's ample opportunity to help folks take promising technology and bring it to customers in the market. And so that sounds a little jargony. And so what that means, that includes things like doing a bunch of customer discovery, going out and talking to customers, figuring out their pain points, building out journey mapping for what's the customer experience and how could a product help to solve those pain points. And then getting all the way into implementation, which, hey, once we have an idea of what a solution is, how do you build that solution? How long will it take? Who should you hire to build the solution? All problems that are tough problems and tough questions to answer, especially for someone who is a brilliant technologist, but maybe doesn't have that same background of commercialization. So that's work stream one, is this commercialization consulting component. The second work stream is commercialization of actual concepts that are incubated out of Glen Lake. And so I'll give you an example of how this comes about. Essentially, myself and our small team of Glen Lake folks go out and talk to people in a variety of different industries, ideally industries that are underserved by current technology solutions. When you talk to someone in, let's say, grocery, back-of-house grocery is an area that we're exploring right now. You realize that all of these incredible solutions, robotics and self-cleaning aisles and smart checkout, touchless checkout, are all being designed for the front of house of grocery, but no one has quite made it to the back of house in grocery to evaluate how can we deploy modern tech solutions, IoT, computer vision, just digital solutions at all, getting them into, beyond pen and paper. How do you deploy solutions to help that aspect of the business? And so that's the second frame of Glen Lake is, as opposed to solving these problems for someone else, we're incubating these from scratch ourselves and creating ideas and ultimately ventures that can be spun out of Glen Pioneering to go in, again, the theme here, solve customer problems out in the world. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I had a question here about, it sounds kind of risky to start a business and not know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it almost makes more sense because you're sort of using the consulting, you're finding problems that are out there that people have. And then you're sort of using that to dovetail with some of the commercialization efforts that you're doing and sort of basically looking for problems first and then solving them through your businesses you would start. Is that sort
exactly
of accurate?
That's exactly it. I think when we got underway with Glen Lake, it was very much hey, I have no idea what I want to build, but I know that early incubation phase is the most important, where if you're working nights and weekends on a concept, you're not giving your best effort, your full attention to the concept that you want to incubate and start. And that's something that I had done previously in my career. I've gone through this startup cycle before, and I think that we talked about Altian Education and the education tech startup. I think that the time that was invested on nights and weekends while I was working at Deloitte was very formative, but also without being the full focus of my energy and our team's energy, we missed some very key underlying components to the business model that I would have absolutely been grateful to figure out by working full time on the effort instead of just putting in nights and weekends. And so Glen Lake was started exactly with that premise that, it is a bold swing to take out on your own and not know exactly what you're going to do. But frankly, I from learned experience, I'm very grateful to have taken that leap because I think it's incredible the amount of opportunity that it's unlocked over the last really 2.5 months. We've been at 2.5 months. It feels like 2 weeks and 6 years all at the same time.
Yeah, no, that sounds super exciting actually.
Yeah. And Pat, one of the things over the last 5-10 years, we've seen the explosion of enterprise level businesses, and people think startups need to turn into this multi-billion-dollar company, or they see where they've ended up. With what you're doing right now, how do you view starting small, being able to test quickly, change, adapt, and take that consideration into what you think of as important when starting a new business?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian, because that's really the crux of the Glen Lake value prop, which is, and we can get into this. I have some hot takes on the topic of venture capital, but essentially the spark notes of it is that venture capital is absolutely fabulous and necessary when you are taking your product from MVP to scale. And so when you're taking your product from 10 customers or 100 customers to 100,000 customers, you very much need venture capital to make that leap. But if you as an entrepreneur can get your product to product market fit, which essentially just means making money with your first few customers that have proven that the product is successful, if you can do that without raising venture capital, and instead by working as lean as possible and iterating, to your point, Brian, iterating as much as possible before you really invest significant money into the concept, you're going to set yourself up for, one, a really clean and favorable cap table for you and your fellow founders. But two, it'll allow you to really do the hard work up front so that when venture capital comes into play, it's the jet fuel that takes you from a $300,000 company to a $30 million company. And so I think, what we're experimenting with is that there are different types of businesses in technology. Not every enterprise technology product has to be a $1 billion business. There's a great book called The Parallel Entrepreneur, and it talks about the concept of starting 2 or 3 businesses that have $10,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue. So these aren't going to be the PayPals, the Twitters, the whatever it may be, unicorns of the world, but they're really solid businesses that solve a customer problem. And I don't know about you guys, but if you told me that I had 3 passive businesses that I spend 5 hours a week on, and they're making me almost $500,000, I think I'd be pretty into that. So I think it's all about what shape of business and how you effectively manage your cash burn so that you don't have to take on venture capital just at the start of your business and get yourself on that venture capital treadmill before you need to.
That's Tim Ferriss level of efficiency there, 4-hour work week type territory.
That's the goal, right? That's what we're all out here trying to do.
Yeah. You know, thinking about, what you're working on right now and some of our listeners out there, what are some of the things you're working on right now that people might be able to help out with or get involved with? We have a lot of eager sort of volunteer students oftentimes.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear a little bit more about the challenges you're working on right now that people might be able to help out with.
Totally. So I think when you jump into a company like Glen Lake, the biggest challenge as a founder is context switching. Basically, you need to spend an hour or two working on back of house grocery and then pivot and spend an hour or two looking at orthopedic technology in healthcare, right? And so while you can do that with maybe 2 or 3 concepts, there are only so many things that you can have rattling around in your brain before your effectiveness starts to diminish. And so we're at a stage with Glen Lake where we have 7 concepts where we think we found a meaningful problem, we found a sizable market, we found a scalable concept, but we're not quite sure exactly what that product is. And we need to do a bunch of research, competitive research, customer discovery to identify that specific concept or product. We're looking for students, MBAs or otherwise, that are interested in what's basically a startup in a box, where we give you the industry, we give you the problem, we may even give you the technology that you can use to solve it. And we, not to mention, we give you the network, the resources, if you need technical staff, if you need design help, we give you all of these items and we say, hey, we'll pay you to go and help us to build this into something that's tangible. And the fun thing about running Glen Lake is if one of those things take off, we'll spin it out. And if that student that worked to figure out the concept wants to continue working on it, we'd consider someone to work as a CEO and take that concept forward. And so I'm personally really excited about the flexibility that Glen Lake offers. And I think if there are students out there that want that really early stage entrepreneurship experience, but in a controlled environment with folks that have been there and done it before, this would be a fabulous opportunity. And I'd welcome folks to reach out. I'd love to chat with folks.
Yeah, no, that it almost sounds like an ETA or almost like a PE type opportunity, but rather than going into established businesses, you're actually looking to create new opportunities and sort of create new markets that are out there.
That's exactly it. GTE is a great example of, and I think a very similar model that we tried to pattern off of, which is, no one says that you have to just jump right into one business. You can explore, and GTE, so Generational Transfer Entrepreneurs, is a search fund company. Essentially, you go out and find established businesses. You're exactly right. This is the same concept, but instead of finding established businesses, you're finding meaningful problems to solve and then building businesses from there.
Awesome. So just kind of thinking about, before we wrap up, we like to kind of conclude with, things you're listening to or watching or reading right now.
Yeah.
What are some of those pieces of content you think is, really caught your attention right now that you'd recommend to someone?
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of books first. One that I'm just halfway through, it just came out this month, is called Burn Rate. Burn Rate by, is it Adam Dunn? Last name's Dunn. Is Adam Dunn a baseball player?
That's the wrong sport. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but he might be.
Yeah, he might be. Maybe we'll get it out in the show notes. The last name is Dunn, but it's so he's the founder of Bonobos, and he tells a really compelling story around being an MBA founder and then dealing with his own mental health challenges along the way, which I think is really interesting because founders are 3 to 4 times more likely to deal with mental health challenges than the average population. And so it's really refreshing to hear a really candid take on that, in the community. So that's one. 2, I go back and forth on the All In podcast. I can't decide if I love it or hate it. I think some weeks I think they're hilarious and they provide really good insight. Other weeks I think they're full of it and and not great. But it is a great resource for people interested in early stage venture. And then another book that's great that is more broad appeal is start with why. I think start with why it's a classic. It's been around for probably 20 years or so. But it's great for anybody in any field just to understand what motivates them to do the things that they do and how you can motivate your team to do things that help to further the mission of the company.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that last one. I think it's a great recommendation. And, All In podcast, I think if we could get there to their level of viewership, we'd be happy. But, we're really focused on putting out, quality content every episode.
Yep.
So
Consistency is key.
And that's what we're trying to do.
I just remembered the name of the bonobos of the burn rate author. It's Andy Dunn. And I think Adam Dunn is a baseball player. I think he was a first baseman for the Reds.
There you go.
Yep.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. This has been Pat O'Donnell from Glen Lake Partners, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Pat. It's been a pleasure.